America, the most powerful nation in human history, 750 military bases across 80 countries, a defense budget larger than the next 10 nations combined, the world's reserve currency, the US dollar. On paper, an absolute colossus. But here's a number I want you to remember: 58%. That's the dollar's share of global reserve currency holdings in 2024. In 2000, it was 71%. In 1977, it was 85%. One number, falling for 50 years straight. And that one number tells you everything about what's really happening to the American empire. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, the way you see the world will never be the same. To understand where America is headed, you have to go back to one single moment: August 15, 1971. Since 1944, the US dollar had been the world's reserve currency under the Bretton Woods system. Foreign central banks could exchange dollars for gold, $35 per ounce. That gold backing gave the dollar its legitimacy. But here's the problem: America had been printing far more dollars than it had gold to back them up. In 1950, US gold reserves stood at 20,000 tons. By 1971, just 800 tons. At that rate, America would have run completely out of gold by 1974. So President Nixon went on national television and said, "I am directing the Secretary of the Treasury to temporarily suspend the convertibility of the dollar into gold." Temporarily. That was 54 years ago. The gold window never reopened. For the first time in human history, the entire global monetary system was backed by nothing. No gold, no silver. Just America's promise that it would stay powerful forever. Now, this should have destroyed the dollar immediately. Why would anyone hold pieces of paper with no intrinsic value? America had one card left to play, and that card was oil. Between 1973 and 1974, Secretary of State Kissinger made a deal with Saudi Arabia. The terms were simple. Saudi Arabia would price all oil sales in US dollars, and only US dollars. In exchange, America would provide military protection to the Saudi regime. That was the birth of the petrodollar system, and it was absolutely genius. Here's why. Every country on Earth needs oil. If oil can only be purchased in dollars, every country on Earth needs dollars, and America controls the printing press. So, what could America do? Print dollars, send them around the world. Other countries use those dollars to buy oil, and those same countries hold on to extra dollars and buy US Treasury bonds, basically lending money back to America. America got to print money and receive real goods in return. That is the ultimate privilege, the most powerful economic cheat code ever invented. But here's the thing about cheat codes. Eventually, people find a way around them. Here's where it gets terrifying. America has not run a single budget surplus since 2001, 24 consecutive years of spending more than it earns. Through Republican administrations, Democrat administrations, wartime, peacetime, doesn't matter. The deficit never stopped. In 2001, US federal debt was $5.8 trillion, about 55% of GDP. Today, $36 trillion, 123% of GDP. That's $30 trillion in new debt in just 23 years. But it's not the debt that'll break the system. It's the interest payments. In 2020, interest on the debt cost $345 billion. In 2024, $892 billion. By 2030, at current interest rates, projected to exceed $1.4 trillion per year. $1.4 trillion just in interest. That's more than the entire defense budget, more than Medicare. Interest payments will become the single largest line item in the federal budget. America will be paying more to service old debt than to actually run the country. So how do you get out of a debt spiral like this? There are only three options. Option 1, default. Simply refuse to pay. The dollar collapses overnight. Imports become unaffordable. Living standards crater by 30 to 50% almost immediately. Option 2, austerity. Cut spending by 30% to balance the budget. That means slashing Social Security, Medicare, and defense all by a third. Politically impossible. You'd have riots in the streets. Option 3, print your way out. Inflate the debt away. Devalue the currency. This is what every empire eventually chooses, because it's the least obvious and the slowest to be felt. America chose option 3. Since 2020, the M2 money supply, essentially the total amount of dollars in existence, increased by 40%. That's why your groceries cost more. That's why your rent is insane. That's why everything feels more expensive. It's not corporate greed, it's monetary debasement. More dollars chasing the same amount of goods. Here's the most important trend happening in the world right now, and almost no one in America is talking about it: the global de-dollarization. In 2022, after Russia invaded Ukraine, the US froze $300 billion in Russian central bank reserves. Now, think about what that actually communicated to every other country on Earth. It said, if you cross Washington, we will simply take your money. The response was immediate. China and Russia now settle 90% of their bilateral trade in yuan and rubles, $0. Saudi Arabia joined BRICS and began accepting yuan for oil sales, directly breaking the Petrodollar agreement Kissinger set up 50 years ago. India is buying Russian oil in rupees. Brazil and China are trading in local currencies. The UAE, Egypt, Argentina, Indonesia, all diversifying away from the dollar. And central banks around the world are buying gold at the fastest rate since 1950. In 2023, 136 tons of gold purchased by central banks. In 2024, over 1,000 tons. Why gold? Because gold cannot be frozen. Gold cannot be sanctioned. Gold doesn't disappear because Washington is angry at you. The world isn't abandoning the dollar because they hate America. They're abandoning it because they watched America weaponize it, and they don't want to be next. And here's the brutal irony. Every sanction America imposes accelerates the very collapse it's trying to prevent. America is essentially committing financial suicide with every geopolitical weapon it fires. But the dollar story is only half of it. To understand why America can't simply rebuild its way out of this, you have to understand what financialization did to the American economy. In 1950, the financial sector was 2.5% of the US economy. Banks took deposits and made loans. Simple. By 2024, finance is 21% of GDP, larger than manufacturing. Meanwhile, manufacturing collapsed from 21% of GDP in 1980 to just 11% today. America stopped making things, it started moving money around and calling that productive. Between 2000 and 2024, America lost 5 million manufacturing jobs. Entire industries vanished: steel mills in Pittsburgh, auto plants in Detroit, textile mills in the Carolinas, electronics manufacturing gone to China. What replaced those jobs? Retail, food service, gig work. The average manufacturing job in 2000 paid $45,000 with benefits. The average service job today pays $28,000 with nothing. The oligarchy traded your $45,000 factory job for a $28,000 service job and a cheap flat-screen TV and told you that was progress. And when COVID hit in 2020, America, the richest country in human history, couldn't manufacture masks, couldn't produce ventilators, had to beg China to send basic medical equipment. The Pentagon released a report in 2023 revealing that America is dependent on China for critical military components. Rare earth minerals, 80% sourced from China. Advanced microchips manufactured in Taiwan, the island China wants to take back. The Department of Defense cannot build its own weapon systems without Chinese-made parts. You cannot rebuild 40 years of de-industrialization in 5 years. The factories are demolished, the workforce retrained for service jobs. The institutional knowledge is gone. The bill for that destruction is now coming due. There's a comparison that makes American elites deeply uncomfortable: the Soviet Union. In the 1980s, the Soviets were spending 15 to 20% of GDP on their military, while their civilian economy produced almost nothing. They couldn't feed their own people. The system was fundamentally broken. But the Soviet nomenclature, the ruling class, had no idea. They lived in Moscow. They shopped at special stores. They had dachas and black cars and access to Western goods ordinary citizens could never dream of. They genuinely believed the system was fine, until it wasn't. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. In 1991, the Soviet Union ceased to exist. First crack to total dissolution, 900 days. Now, look at America's ruling class today. They live in Manhattan, Greenwich, Palo Alto, and DC. They watch their stock portfolios hit all-time highs. They see GDP numbers and think the economy is booming. But drive through Ohio, Drive through West Virginia. Drive through the industrial towns of Pennsylvania and Michigan. You see the real economy. Shuttered factories, dollar stores replacing Main Street businesses, opioid graves, towns that never recovered from 2008 and never will. Half of all Americans can't afford a $400 emergency expense. Medical bankruptcy is the leading cause of personal bankruptcy in the richest country on earth. The American elite doesn't see this, not because they're evil, but because they genuinely live on a different planet. Just like the Soviet nomenclature, and just like the Soviets, they will not see the collapse coming until it's already here. Based on current trends, here's what the math projects. 2025 to 2027, dollar reserves fall towards 55%. Inflation stays persistent at 4 to 6%. Federal debt crosses $40 trillion. Interest payments exceed $1 trillion annually. 2027 to 2029, major oil producers shift to multi-currency pricing. Dollar reserves approach 52%. The Federal Reserve faces a nightmare choice: raise rates and crash the economy, or keep printing and accept 8 to 10% inflation. They choose inflation. 2029 to 2032, dollar reserves fall below 50%. This is the tipping point. Network effects reverse. Countries begin dumping dollars. Treasury auctions start failing. The dollar loses 30 to 40% of its value. Imports become unaffordable. Inflation reaches 15 to 20%. 2032 to 2035, post-dollar world. America is no longer the global hegemon. The military footprint shrinks. Entitlement spending gets cut. Living standards fall to 1970s levels. Political chaos follows. This isn't a prediction based on a feeling. This is arithmetic. You cannot run trillion-dollar deficits indefinitely. You cannot deindustrialize and remain a superpower. You cannot weaponize your currency without destroying the very system it supports. And you cannot maintain an empire after you've hollowed out your ability to produce anything real. So what do you actually do with this information? Look at what the financial elite is doing right now and follow their lead. They are not holding cash, they're holding hard assets, real estate, farmland, gold, commodities, assets that hold value when currencies collapse. They're diversifying out of dollar exposure. They're building skills that work in any economy: medical, agricultural, mechanical. The ability to fix things, grow things, and heal people will always have value. And above everything else, they understand what's happening because the media won't tell you. The government won't warn you. The oligarchy has every incentive to keep you distracted until it's too late. The British pound was 87% of global reserves in 1945. By 1965, just 30%, a 20-year collapse that ended Britain's global empire. The dollar is on the same path, just faster because the world moves faster now. The Soviet Union looked like a superpower on the very last day it existed. America looks like one today. The empire built on a printing press is learning what every empire eventually learns. You cannot print your way to prosperity. You cannot financialize your way to power. And you cannot maintain dominance after you've destroyed your ability to produce. The wall is coming down. The only question is, are you paying attention?